You're listening to the World Footy Net Podcast. Welcome to the World Footy Net Podcast. You can email us at podcast@worldfooty.net or alternatively, post your comments on the World Footy Net Facebook page.
The WFN podcast is back after a short break from the airwaves, and in this returning episode, we center on football in North America. Among the topics for this episode include the U.S. men's national team's recent performances, MLS news, and what's happening in the divisions of the NASL and USL. So sit back and enjoy the next segment of the WFN Weekly Podcast.
Welcome to the World Footy Net Podcast. I am Andre Sherrard, and I will be your moderator for tonight's show. Dre Footy is behind the scenes, engineering the show and making it look perfect. Dre, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good, Sherrard. This is Dre Footy, and of course you can follow all the happenings at World Footy Net on Twitter at WFootyNet, and you can catch up with all the banter that we're talking about.
Also, we have Davin Lassiter. Davin, how are you doing tonight?
Not too good. Good to be back. Twitter's Mr. Lassiter, not just soccer, but probably about 80 to 90% of so. If anybody wants to follow, again, it's Mr. Lassiter on Twitter.
Perfectly. And last but not least, Jason Longshore. Jason, how are you?
Hey, good. Just got off the practice field with my Estudiantes team from Soccer in the Streets. You can follow them and all of Soccer in the Streets activities at Soccer Streets on Twitter, and I'm at Longshoe on Twitter.
Awesome. All right, well, let's talk about the U.S. national team because they had two matches over the past couple of days. We went 1-1 during these two games. It was a slight shock that we lost in Jamaica 2-1 last Friday. But we made up for it with a 1-0 victory on Tuesday with a Hercules Gomez free kick. Davin, who do you think performed well and who do you think struggled?
As far as the guys that did pretty well, I thought Graham Zusi came out like a national team veteran. Definitely hoping to see much more of him on this team. From the opening whistle, he attacked well, didn't seem like he was fazed by the occasion at all, had some really good shots, didn't score, unfortunately. I think he hit the crossbar once or twice, so he had a really good performance. I think his stock definitely raised from that game. Love Danny Williams. He was great in holding midfield, I thought. Hate that he had to shift right when Klinsmann decided to preserve the lead instead of trying to extend it late, in the end of the second half. Both outside right backs I thought were great. Not sure why Sharundalo didn't play last game if he was available. Jeff Cameron still looks pretty comfortable on the back line. Torres looked better, but I'm not sure he's going to end up being our answer on the left. Dempsey, I think he's still missing some from being out of games while he was getting his club situation figured out, but I don't think he played that badly. And, of course, he got got the goal in the first game. Gomez is doing pretty well. The goal shouldn't have been scored. Miller was outstanding most of the game, and that he let that in was a shock. But the good hit, and sometimes you have to make your own luck to get it on frame. Anything can happen. So those are the main guys that stood out for me. As far as guys who struggled, wasn't able to see the first half of the first leg, but I did see the second half, and Beckerman was still giving away a lot of balls by then. So I think he's the one we kind of it's kind of like our number one guy that struggled. So just maybe international competition right now it's maybe a little bit too much to ask for him right now. He's the main guy I thought that struggled. Josie's still continuing to do precious little when he gets national team time. He's at the top of the scoring charts in the Dutch league, so I'm wondering, is it a question of different players between the national team and AZ? Is he getting better service there, or formation changes causing that much of a problem? I'm not really sure. Just kind of throwing things out because I saw Josie play against Ajax in the season opener, and he was excellent. He looked to be at ease with the ball at his feet. good balance of smart runs, being able to give himself space for shots. But I don't really think he's dealing with anything special that most players don't when dealing with club and country. Maurice Adu didn't really do anything damaging a lot of the time, but nothing particularly good either. And that goes pretty much for both games. At the end of the second game, it just seemed Klinsmann started making subs and things just didn't gel to close the game out. It looked like an entirely different team than the team we saw in the first half. I think I think the result from the first game falls mostly on Klinsmann, but those guys out there have also got to perform also. But with a better game plan, the guys responded, and we saw a different team. So, but those are the main guys that I thought were struggled. But I think a lot of the issues in the first game are more coaching than players.
Jason, what do you think about Josie and his play with the national team and with the club team?
I haven't seen him as much over in Holland recently. I know he's been playing well over the last year there. You wouldn't have guessed it from these two games. I honestly, when I was talking to somebody about the first game on Monday, I forgot who the other forward was besides Gomez and Dempsey. I didn't know who was there because Josie did nothing. And when he came on in the second game, I haven't seen too many guys have as bad of a 10-15 minute spell as he did. He gave the ball away 4 or 5 times out of his first 5 or 6 touches, and just it's like he went brain dead. He was making some very bad decisions that could have hurt us. He's got to be past that at this point. He's got to be able to realize the situation, keep possession in that situation, don't give the ball away easily, don't turn inside and go to goal when there's no reason to in the 89th minute. Those types of things that if it's a 18 or 19-year-old player playing in one of his first internationals, okay. If it's Graham Zusi even, okay, you might give him a pass. Josie's got to be past that. And I got to disagree with a couple things that you said, Davin. Beckerman specifically, I think Beckerman takes a lot of crap from a lot of people. In that situation on Friday, when he's paired up with Jermaine Jones and Maurice Adu, he's got no real options to play. In front of him, there's a big gap, and that was, I think, one of the bigger problems with Friday's game. But if you go back and look, while we weren't exactly blowing him off the field in the first half when Beckerman was on, we were keeping a lot better possession with him in than without him. He had some giveaways, sure. Anybody in that role is gonna have some.
Yeah, he seems like a player that wins the ball, tackles, gives it up.
Yeah, he's a linking player. That's what he is. And when there's nobody to link with, then you're wasting him being on the field.
Yep.
And in the lineup Friday, it didn't make any sense. And for me, I would never have Jermaine Jones and Maurice Adu on the field at the same time because they do the same things. They don't add anything when they're on there together. And they both have too many giveaways. Yeah,
that's a good point. They're all very more destructive players, and when you run the ball, it's the idea of what do you do with it. So that's also a good point.
It was just Friday was just a weird game, and I think it did show that we are still extremely reliant on Bocanegra and Cherundolo's leadership. I think that had a big impact on the difference between Friday and Tuesday, which is a good and a bad thing because 2 years from now, are they going to be as capable in Brazil as they are now? You don't know. They're at that age where they could get old real fast, and I think we have some players like Jeff Cameron who's shown that he can play at this level and he can be a major player. Parkhurst is solid, but Cherundolo was the best player we had on the field on Tuesday.
Agreed. Williams was probably a close second.
Yeah, Williams was very good. There's not as big of a margin for error as there should be right now. And that's the kind of scary part for this team going forward.
Yeah. Just a quick question. How do you grade Jurgen's coaching job through these last 2 matches? Davin, start with you.
Let's see. First game, not too good at all. Like I was saying before, I think the majority of the issues that we had in that game were one from, like we were talking about, the midfield. We got guys to take the ball and not guys to really create and do anything with it as far as getting forward. The strikers were starved of service, and when that happens, no matter who you're playing, you're going to have issues. Not really sure why that was. We had Breck Shea on the bench. I know that maybe I think we're all kind of seeing him more as an option off of the bench, but I would have liked to see him out on the left against a team like Jamaica and not rely so much on the outside backs getting forward, because nobody really had a good game that time. And so for that game, I don't give Jurgen high marks. In the second game, it was like a completely different team, and so yes, definitely second game was much better than the first for Queensland. I think he got the tactics right. We were unlucky not to score a couple more goals, crossbar, and Miller was excellent for Jamaica in goal. So about a D first game, and because Jurgen kind of switched things up at the end and just tried to preserve the lead instead of just going ahead with it, and it could have backfired on us. I'll give him about a B- for the second game.
Okay. Jason?
In general, I've not been the biggest fan of Klinsmann's performance. That Mexico game was a great result, but it was almost at a bad time, because if you go back and look at it, we played awful in that game.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen just about every game the U.S. has played in the Azteca since like '97, and it was the worst one that I can think of. We scored a fluky goal, but other than that, we had no possession, we created nothing, and got out of there with a result. And I think that might have gotten into our heads a bit. I think he made some mistakes in the roster selection, especially for these 2 matches where they fell in the calendar. There's a lot of MLS players that I think were overlooked here, and this would have been the time that they could have been extremely valuable, because you're looking at guys who are in mid-season form, who are firing on all cylinders and are playing with some confidence, rather than players who, are in unsettled situations, haven't been playing regularly, are in really an early season or even preseason form. Mm-hmm. And I think it showed overall through the 180 minutes. Jamaica played more MLS guys than we did. And I think that was a big mistake. We talk about Altidore and what he did in these games. Again, I think I've said it just about every time we've had one of these. Wondolowski. You called in Alan Gordon before. There's Eddie Johnson's playing great in MLS, playing with a lot of confidence. Those are guys who could have shown something here that an Altidore who's in early season form, or Adu just switched clubs, Cameron's just switched clubs. There's guys who, some guys played through it and some guys showed that they weren't in top form. Dempsey's an exception. Dempsey is a player that if he's walking, you put him on the field. Yeah. That's a special case. But out of this roster, he would have been the only one. Donovan and Bradley are in that category.
Yeah.
Just like I said before, the midfield and in Jamaica was just a nightmare, and the setup is, I think, what caused it. Yeah. So that's on Klinsmann. And I think he made it a lot more interesting in the second half for Jamaica than he needed to after Gomez's goal. I hated to see him go defensive, and it wasn't even really in a smart way. It was kind of just don't give anything up. Mm-hmm. There wasn't a lot of strategy to it.
Right.
And that's kind of the drawback with Klinsmann. Klinsmann is a great talker, a great motivator, great for PR, but when it comes to tactics, that's always been the question mark. And luckily it didn't hurt us in the second half against Jamaica, but there were a lot of times that I was wondering if Jamaica was going to pull one there, and then how that would have left us going forward. Even still, it's not a guarantee that we're getting into the Hex, which we should be past that stage now.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting not to see many more MLS players. I mean, like you guys said, Graham Zusi played well when he got on.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, put out some of the better players in the MLS, see what they can do. And I mean, you have players coming in, coming into their setup, just getting started, first couple of games, and then they're coming into the national team setup. They don't have that rhythm that I guess a player in mid-season form in the MLS probably has.
Yeah, and this would have been the prime time to give those guys that chance. I mean, Wondolowski has deserved more of a shot than he's gotten with the national team. I mean, what else does he have to do? You called in Alan Gordon for Mexico. This would have been especially with the way the games turned out, it would have been a great situation for an Alan Gordon, a big target forward who we could have played direct to, and he can hold the ball and he can distribute and he can finish. Once
we get to those like away matches in Jamaica, Central America, I mean, I hate to say it like this, but we kind of got to goon it up a little bit. I mean, it's sad to say, but I mean, we're not going to get much possession or anything like that going into a small, bumpy pitch where the crowd's literally almost on top of us.
Yeah, you have to be able to handle that, and one way to handle it at times in these games is to play direct and to play, a uglier style that can be effective. I mean, that's the issue that I had with the setup for Friday was it seemed like that was the mentality Klinsmann wanted to get across with having Jones and Adu on the field at the same time. I mean, that's what they do. They're physical, hardworking center midfielders, but you didn't really have anything else. It's like, okay, let's put these guys in, let them run around, knock people over, and that's it. You have to just think through these things, and if you want one, okay, cool, then you can still build around it and build an attack and figure out how to build out of the back. Or if we're going to skip the midfield and just play direct, have a forward up there who you can play direct to. I love Hercules Gomez. He just busts his ass on the field, but he's not a target forward. Josie's not a target forward.
Yeah.
We kind of went into that. It's like without the tools we needed to play the way I think he wanted to play. I don't know. I don't really know what and that's the problem, is that you couldn't exactly tell what the mindset was and what the exact plan was. And that's a problem at this stage.
All right, well, let's get to the MLS. We've talked enough about the U.S. national team, and we could pretty much talk ages about that. But a side that's very close to you guys here, DC United. They're struggling at the moment. They only won 2 of their last 10 games. And I just heard that they've lost Dwayne De Rosario for the rest of the season. Starting with you, Davin, do you think that they'll be able to get through this rough patch?
Always difficult to say. A couple of the issues besides the injuries and things and the adjustments we've had to make because of them, you just never know when DC's going to drop a lead or have a collapse late in the game or just not be firing, or you never know when they're going to score 3 or 4. You just really don't know, but I do know De Rosario out. That's a huge loss of talent and on-field leadership. Obviously, a guy who's among the top players in the league. But I mean, we've had a lot of issues with injuries to some key players. As far as our defense, it's a harder question to ask who hasn't gotten injured on our back line. Throughout the season, we've had Jakovic out, Russell, Wooler, who had been playing the best. I think most of us had ever seen him play before he got hurt. Dudar hasn't been back in the lineup that long. Up front, we've also had to do without Micah and Santos. We're still without Rosebroom, Salihi, and King. And again, De Rosario's out for the rest of the season. And, this point in the season, looking towards the playoffs, any month's a terrible month to be out, but especially if it's Dwayne out. Also, besides that, looking back, I think had a few when we were had a couple issues, especially like with the Montreal game. I thought that was a missed opportunity, fielding a less than full strength lineup against what I thought was a very beatable Montreal team. And when we had Daryl healthy before international duty, we had Pontius. So as well as injuries, I think there's also in the past handful of games there's been some strange selections by Ben Olsen also. We played. We got Mike Shabala to cover for Mike Wooler, and there were games where we had Brandon McDonald playing outside back when we had him on the bench. I know he's probably still getting acclimated to our system or whatever, but he's a left back, and McDonald's obviously a center back, and he was on the bench. So it's a couple of other decisions here and there in the last few games, but as we get healthy, I think a lot of the lineup choices are gonna get a little easier, and I think we definitely got too much quality to not sneak in there, even if it's fourth or fifth place.
Jason, why do you think that they're struggling right now? They haven't won many games in the last couple of months, so why do you think that they're struggling at this point in
time? The injuries are definitely a factor, and the last couple weeks before the international break were one of the most difficult schedules that I've seen in a while. They played 5 games between the 19th of August and the 1st of September, which is really difficult for teams at this level to handle, especially factoring in injuries on top of the roster. The Chabala thing is weird, and Davin touched on it. They brought him in, and it's almost like they haven't liked what they've seen since they brought him in, because they definitely haven't trusted him to play very much, and they've been playing people out of position to cover it. I mean, Jakovic has played wide, McDonald's played wide, and neither one of them can play on the outside effectively. That's a concern. D-Row being out, I don't know what's going to happen from here on out. I'd like to say that it opens up a great opportunity for Boskovic to continue his strong play. It might even help Boskovic in some ways, because D-Row is having a good season. He's starting to show his age a little bit, and where he plays, I think, can take away space for a guy like Boskovic to be effective. We'll see if really going to a more traditional 4-4-2, which is what I would guess the plan is going to be from here on out, with Kitchen behind probably Boskovic would be the attacking mid with 2 forwards. A lot of times they would play De Rosario as a second forward with either Salih or Santos or whoever it was that day. And D-Row likes to drop real deep, so it was kind of clogged in that area. This might open that up a little bit, and I'd like, if we can just figure out a forward pairing that can work. It seems like the forwards have gone on their own little streaks here individually. Santos started out hot and hasn't done much since. Salihi had a run there in the middle. Pontius has probably been the most consistent. It's going to be tough. This slump has put them in a tough spot, and now with D-Row out, people are going to have to step up and show why they were brought in. Chabala is going to have to contribute one way or another. They're going to have to play him. And Boskovic, especially after earning the contract extension, he's going to have to show it. I don't know. Luckily, the schedule is a little kind from here on out. You've got New England, you've got Chivas USA, you've got some of the weaker teams, you've got Toronto. You've got games that you can pick up 3 points, and those are going to have to be crucial. I agree with Davin on the Montreal game. I think that was one where I would have almost rather seen Olsen punt maybe the New York game or the Salt Lake game and say, all right, that game's a toss-up with my top lineup. If I put my top lineup on Montreal, I get 3 points. So I'm going to take the sure 3 points. Mm-hmm. It's tough to think about, especially when it comes to New York and a rivalry game for DC. That's a tough decision to make.
Yeah.
But 5 games in 2.5 weeks is brutal.
Quick question. Will they make the playoffs? Yes or no? Gavin?
I say yes.
Say
I think
yes.
they'll squeak in at least.
Jason?
I really, really want to say yes. But they've got to jump Columbus and Houston right now, or at least one of them, and it's going to be tough. Columbus is the one, and it could come down to they play the next to last game of the season. That could be the biggest game of the year for United. It's at RFK on October 20th. Wouldn't surprise me if it comes down to that game. And I'm going to say yes. I think they're going to find a way through it. But it's going to be extremely difficult.
I have a bonus question to you guys. Between Kansas City and San Jose, who would you think would win the MLS Cup final if that was the setup?
I'm going to say San Jose. Still talked about this earlier in earlier podcast, but the firepower they have on the team, Wondolowski, Gordon, their ability to come back in clutch situations, I would definitely pick San Jose without a doubt. I mean, the type of team they have this year and the type of results they have, they're made for the type of high-pressure championship game that MLS Cup is. So, yeah, San Jose, no question.
Jason?
I would agree. I think San Jose is the team to beat this year. Definitely over Kansas City. I think Kansas City is a good, hardworking team, but when they come up against some of the higher-level teams, I would, if even looking at the Western Conference right now, I would favor any of the top 4 teams, San Jose, Seattle, Salt Lake, or LA, over Kansas City. I think those types of games are tough for Kansas City. They did win the Open Cup game against Seattle, but didn't exactly look convincing doing it.
Yeah.
I think San Jose is the team to beat in the league this year. They've just got this thing. I mean, sometimes it happens. Yallop has done a great job. They've got guys who can score goals, and it's not just one player. It's a few. And they're winning games late. They're winning games ugly. They're winning games they, on paper, maybe shouldn't have won. And that's a sign of a good team. And I think this is going to be the season that they come back and get back to where they were before the club moved to Houston. I think this is going to be, their kind of return to the top.
All right, let's move down to the lower leagues. The NASL have changed their season format. They decided to have too many seasons like what they have in South America, with the winner of each season facing each other in the, hey, you guys won't believe it, the Soccer Bowl. Yes, the Soccer Bowl. Davin, what are your thoughts about this new format change? And do you think that's a good idea?
There's some things I like about it. There are some things I don't. As far as league structures that currently exist, I place it above MLS, where you can end up having a situation like Salt Lake was a few years ago, having a losing record and then even being able to have a sniff at the title. I never really liked that system where you kind of can win a couple games at the end when other teams have done well all season. I place it below single table like that they have in Europe. I don't understand and even in Latin America, I don't really understand the 2 champs. So it just seems like you could win the earlier championship and then be terrible the next season. But it's only a month in between, so I don't really expect teams to, be dominated and then be at the bottom, after a month or so time. But I don't really understand why there are 2 championships. And other than that, I mean, I like the part where it's not a playoff format like what we have in MLS. So I just think there are some things that are unnecessary about it, but I'm kind of waiting to see how it plans out. I like that it looks like it's going to reward those teams who play well throughout the season, and that's my if I can't have the single table, then I'll go with that.
I like the format. There's some things that I would have tweaked different, just kind of personal preference. But I like it. I like the timing of it a lot. It's probably the closest that the U.S. can effectively be on everybody wants to say the European calendar, which I think is a little ridiculous. I like that it opens up the summer transfer window. I like that, it has the winter transfer window open. I think it makes it easier to do business in those two transfer windows. That's a good thing for U.S. soccer, and I think it's something that MLS might look at in a modified way. I could care less what they call the championship game. I mean, if they call it Soccer Bowl, whatever, it's a championship game. It's kind of a weird way to do it, though. Most countries, most leagues that do the two-season format, the Apertura, Clausura type of format, have two distinct champions for the year. When they do have a game between the two, it's a cup. It's like the Super Copa.
Yeah.
So this is a little weird, and it does open up that door that, of course, everybody who wants to, complain about it has said, is that a team could win the first half, be in last place in the second half, and then win the championship game. So, I mean, yeah, that opens it up, and I'm not the biggest fan of that. I would rather just have two distinct champions, and if they have the Soccer Bowl for the Soccer Bowl Cup or whatever you want to call it, great. More power to them. I think it's a better situation. It's been interesting to watch the reaction because everybody's jumping on that specific aspect. That's the thing that I've heard a lot. And it's the same people who would complain before about playoffs. I think it's an improvement over 6 out of 8 teams being in the playoff. I think that's crazy. At least MLS, it's 10 out of 19, which I think is too many. I would rather see 8, just an even. If you're going to do a playoff with MLS with the teams they have, do 8 and just keep it simple. I think 10 is silly. Anytime you do that non-group of 4 type of playoff system and you have teams on a bye, and it's awkward, and I don't think it helps.
I don't like the bye setup too, because I mean,
it hurts the team who has the bye.
Exactly.
I'd love to go back and do the stats on it, but I'll bet you it's not that high of a percentage that the team on the bye actually wins. I think they get knocked out a lot more than they should based off their seed.
Yeah.
The thing is, with only isn't it a month in between? So yeah, I think it's gonna be a rare occasion where a month off is gonna turn a team from dominating to just terrible. So I
agree.
For the most part, it's going to be, 1 or 2 good teams that are close for the fall championship and close for the winter championship. So I think at the end, most times, maybe 8 out of 10 times, you're going to have an issue where the Soccer Bowl is contested by 2 teams, like the first and second, or the second and third, or the first and third, or something like that. And maybe you'll have that, anomaly every once in a while where, a lower team makes a run in the second half of the year and challenges for the Soccer Bowl. But I think for the most part, you're going to have the high-quality teams make it. But there's always that chance that something weird could happen. So
it always happens. Sports. Yeah, exactly. That's sports. That's kind of the beauty of it. I mean, that's why the NCAA basketball tournament is such a big deal, because you have, some random little small team that pulls upsets and everybody gets excited. And then at the end of the day, it ends up being, 2 of the top 4 teams in the final, and your champion is usually deserved.
Right.
I mean, that's how it goes.
Yeah, I think with college there are so many teams, and it's hard to kind of figure out who's good, because you got a team playing in this side of the country, in this conference, and that conference is considered weaker than this one. So I think it works a little better with March Madness, because it's so hard to really rank those teams, whereas as you got more of a kind of a closed set where you got these teams every year, and it's just a little easier to keep track of also.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting move in U.S. soccer, and I'd be willing to bet that MLS is watching it very closely to see how it goes. I like it. I like that NASL has taken this chance in doing it. I think it's the closest that we'll get to the calendar that I think some people get hung up on. What I like is that it opens up. It probably gives us the biggest window to play that we're going to have in the U.S. And even still, with teams like Edmonton and Minnesota, those games in early March and those games in late November are going to be brutal. Mm-hmm. That's going to be an adjustment for fans and for teams. But that's about as much as we can stretch it. I mean, realistically, when you have a nationwide league in the U.S., I think I like that they're taking July off because all of us have seen way too many games in the middle of July when it's 100 degrees and it's just an awful game.
Right. Yep.
I like that we're going to see more games in colder parts of the year, but we're not trying to be bullheaded and play through December, January in parts of the country that, again, it's going to make for an awful game. Right. It's an interesting compromise situation. I want to see how it plays out. And that's, I think, what we just kind of have to wait and see. I think it's a cool idea, and I'm really excited that somebody's taken that chance.
All right. Also, congratulations to the Charleston Battery for winning the USL Pro Championship. Jason, do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm pretty familiar with Charleston and what that club's been about, and they've always been a strong defensive team. That's been kind of the hallmark with the coaching staff they have that's been there for a long time. I was really surprised to see Orlando get knocked out. Yeah. And I'll be curious to see if there's a change in mentality and maybe money put into Orlando next year. They were spending probably a budget a lot closer to an NASL team than a USL Pro team, and it didn't pay off.
Did they have that buy?
Yeah, exactly. It didn't pay off with a championship. I mean, I think it paid off with good crowds, getting a good bit of attention for the franchise. Be outside of Orlando and what they've done since the Aztecs moved there, Charleston has been the class of USL. They have always put solid teams out, whether it was in the second division or the third. They're not pretty, they're not flashy. Nothing fancy about them, but they play good defense, and looks like that's what got them through again. And they had Andrew Dykstra from DC, who I didn't get to see much this year, but did a decent job for them all year, it looked like.
And the irony of that is duly noted.
Davin, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I caught a replay of the game. I thought Charleston looked the sharpest overall, but though at times Wilmington looked like they might slip one in once or twice early on. Both defenses were pretty solid. Seemed to be, for me, one of those games where it stayed mainly in the middle. Not a whole lot of good chances throughout, but of course after the goal, things started to open up some. But Wilmington was still pretty much. They tried a couple times to play the ball on the ground and build from the back, but typically it was just very direct, hoof it upfield and hope for the best. Dykstra wasn't very active in this game either. Had a couple of grabs at the end to preserve the win. Neither keeper was incredibly busy, though. Tyler Lassiter from Wilden, thought he was a constant positive for Wilmington in defense. Horvath had a great save on Cuevas early on, and that's about all I really saw from either keeper as far as saves that I can remember. Finally got beaten by Zera, former Mississippi Bria guy, my hometown PDL team, I might add, that I ended up winning the game. Overall, it's not as thrilling as I wanted for a final, but fair result, well-taken goal to win it. I think that's their third or fourth title in the past 4 or 5 years. So, yeah, good for Charleston. And that's a league I want to watch more of in the future. I was an on and off again Kickers fan. So, yeah, next season I'll do better as far as keeping up with USL.
Hey, Sherrard, let me ask you this. Since you saw a good bit of USL Pro this year and you've seen a good bit of NASL, how is it shaken out now that we're 2 years into the Division II, Division III difference? Does it show on the field? Does it show on the rosters between NASL and USL Pro?
It does a little bit until you start adding those MLS loanies to some of the USL teams. And I watched a game earlier in the season, and it was like a USL game. It was just I couldn't watch it. It was unwatchable. And at least I watched the Silverbacks before that, and I mean it was better quality. The players were better, But like once teams started getting MLS players in there who don't play for their teams, the quality could have been basically at an equal. Maybe NASL was just slightly better, but I mean I think a team like Orlando could possibly be close to the top in NASL.
I could definitely see that with an Orlando. I think they're kind of a special case, just with the investment that's been put into that team. What about Charleston? Where do you think they would fit in an ASL?
Charleston, I saw them once, and I thought they would probably be closer to the bottom because I mean they have a lot of athletes.
Yeah,
but I didn't really think that they were that good. I didn't think they were good enough to beat a team like San Antonio once in a while, or Fort Lauderdale, or even Carolina for that matter.
Yeah, I agree. Neither team in the final looked like they could really go in the NSL and make a real impact. They have a couple. I thought Sanyang for Charleston was a pretty good player, but he's still mostly kind of like the breaking up plays, maybe more destructive type of player than a guy who's gonna really set up plays. So you got those hard working individuals, but other than that, like the game started out just both teams just sitting in straight up field, and yeah, I'm not sure how well they would do in the NSL at this point either. They're a pretty good USL team, but I don't know about NASL either.
I'll be interested to see really what happens in Orlando. They've positioned that team and that franchise to be more than a third division team.
Yeah.
And I'll be curious to see what their next steps are. I mean, I know they've had the conversations with MLS. I know they've been working on stadium situations, either, in a renovated Citrus Bowl or something new. With the whole MLS and New York City too, and now that Atlanta's moving further along on its stadium, and Atlanta's possibly coming back into play in terms of MLS, at least the talk is happening out of Arthur Blank's folks. It'll be interesting to see. I wonder if Orlando would make the move to the second division, which I think would make more sense for what they're spending, or would they want to stay as the big fish in the smaller pond?
I think it'd probably be better for them at least to make that move to the second division. Don't want to make that jump all the way up because I mean, are the crowds and atmosphere like what was in Seattle or Portland?
No, I don't think so. I think they need a little more time. I mean, they're drawing in that nice 7,000 to 10,000 range. Building a culture. They're doing the right things. I like what they're doing there. They've been smart about it. I'd like to see them make that next step. And in the absence of a promotion relegation system right now, and in the absence of all of the business side of that being ready for it, and I don't want to open that door up. I think the best move for them would be to look to move up into NASL, and I think it would benefit both parties.
And plus, I mean, Florida pro teams, I mean, it's a tough sell. I mean, Tampa Bay and Miami Fusion, they couldn't really do anything, there. So it's kind of a tough sell to have a pro team in Florida as it is.
It's a riskier move for MLS. I think they've got other options that are more appealing. I think the second New York team is more appealing than Orlando to MLS. Yeah, I really think it is. It's less of a risk.
Yeah, get that team in the city of New York. You have a whole brand new fan base instead of having the New Jersey folks going to Red Bull games and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think there's some better situations for MLS if they pan out. I think Atlanta's a better. I'm not trying to be too biased, but Atlanta is a better situation than Orlando at the Major League Soccer level. I really think it is. I think San Diego would be as well. But you have to respect what Orlando City's done and what they've built from nothing in 2 years.
Very true. All right, guys. I appreciate you. You guys carried the podcast along perfectly. And audience, see you later.